What's up, everybody? Rogan had a guest on the other day, Thomas Campbell, and what he described is very close to my theory of everything, my explanation for reality. So I thought it's been a minute. Let's do some woo woo. We'll talk about a couple of other things like the Buddhist idea of heaven not so much being an eternal afterlife the way that we think of it in the West, but being another higher realm that you incarnate into, but then you just live a quasi mortal life there. I'd say quasi mortal because it's not necessarily governed by the same rules as our physical reality. And we'll talk a little bit about astral projection. But first, yoga. I don't know what it's like where you're at right now, but I could probably use some of this hot yoga because it's 3 degrees outside. So I hope everybody's staying warm out there. The biggest battle I've had with my house for the last 3 years is fighting off the extreme colds when it gets there. And I was doing good till last night and the hot water froze, which I thought I had left it dripping, but evidently it was just the cold water dripping. So Operation Thaw is my project for the day. So in the West, especially California, yoga means little rich girls that run around with painted on clothes all day so they can do 30 minutes of stretching and tell you, I'm spiritual, not religious. But I'm guessing the Buddha wasn't face down, arse up when he finally reached his moment of clarity. Real yogis can spend an entire lifetime mastering how to sit in one position. It's actually really hard to just sit like that for 30 minutes and not be fatigued. And they'll do that for days on end. It's all about what's going on the inside. This is Hatha yoga, but that's just one of the 4 main paths. And I wanted to talk about jhana yoga real quick because I think subconsciously a lot of us are kind of drawn in that direction. It's the truth seeker's path to enlightenment. I've heard it described in many different ways, but this is the gist of it. Jhana yoga is based on knowledge, inquiry, and asking questions. It's one-pointed concentration on one question, and you must reject all facts, all truths, reject everything that is known, and look inside to find the answer to that question. If you have to ask what the question is, you're not ready for jhana yoga. In jhana yoga, the question will present itself to you, and then you will spend your time in self-study finding the answer to that question. So I do this a lot. I'm drawn towards a certain subject and I aggregate all of the info. But then there's only a few subjects I actually take the time to sit down and think about what I think it is. What does this mean to me? Like my theory of reality that we're about to get into. That's something that I actually thought, well, okay, I'm going to sit down and put together all the clues that I've acquired over my lifetime about this and make it make sense. And it's really easy to not ever do that, to just keep devouring all the information possible and then never process it. So just a friendly reminder that it's good to unplug every once in a while, get in touch with your gut instincts, and listen to what you've already got stored up inside of you. A bunch of random facts does not equate to wisdom. Okay, so this is Thomas Campbell on Rogan the other day, and I'll let him kick off this next bit. He's talking about astral projection, out-of-body experience kind of thing.
I don't know that he tried many different methods. He very quickly came to the metaphor of, I just roll out, roll out, roll out. He would be lying there in his body, and he would feel a pulsation state. And he measured it as best he could, and he said it was around 4 hertz, four beats a second. And he'd feel this as he'd feel his body pulsating. He'd feel his mind, kind of pulsating. And when he got that pulsation state, he would just roll out, and he'd find himself out of body. And he wrote that in his books, and now there's 500,000 people lying in their beds, going like this, trying to roll out. But that was Bob's metaphor.
So have any of you guys ever experienced that? For me, it came completely unwanted, unexpected, but it happened. I would say the first time was, 14, 15, 16, and it continued into my mid-20s and then stopped for the most part. But I had no idea what it was because to begin with, you don't get the astral projection part. At least I didn't. The beginning state of that is just a sleep paralysis, and the only frame of reference I had for anything was like Carlos Castaneda books. There's quite a few things in there about dreaming. But this was my experience. The first handful of times this happened, it was usually when I would get up in the middle of the night and then be falling back asleep. And if you're trying to do this intentionally, that's definitely the best time to do it. But I wasn't trying to do anything except for go back to sleep. And my body would fall asleep, but my mind was still awake. And then that pulsation that he described, I always just called it the vibration, would begin. And it was this really uncontrollable shaking that would begin. And it's like having no control over your body. So it's actually a scary sensation. And then you try to move and get up or shift around, and you're frozen there and you're sitting here shaking. If you've ever been in a dream where you feel like you really need to wake up, it's like that. But I was just frozen in my body. And finally, a trick I learned to wake up was start trying to wiggle my big toe. It was kind of the one part of my body that my mind could still control that would actually make a physical movement where my body would kind of naturally want to wake up. Well, I think it was through the Castaneda books, if you've ever read them, about, looking at your hands in the dream and then trying to remain calm and not get fixated on anything. But one way or another, I decided to let this thing take its course, and I was able to stay calm throughout that vibration period. Now, he described you just roll out, and that's something I can definitely relate to, but it happened a little bit different for me. It would be this uncontrollable vibration, and then all of a sudden my feet would feel like they're lifting up, and then it would feel like my entire body did a headstand, floating feet up backwards. And I probably freaked out and woke myself up 5 times when that started happening. When you feel like you're levitating up, it freaks you out. But I was finally able to stay relaxed, got to that fully inverted position, and it felt like the world just went inside out. And then there I was, floating over my body in my room, looking down at myself, sleeping. Once again, I was fighting to stay calm because at this point I understood that if I got excited, I'd wake myself up. But now I finally understood what was going on. And it's not dreaming. You never actually fall asleep. You're conscious through the whole thing. So then, of course, I want to go fly around and explore everything. But this is not like a flying dream where you kind of swim through the air. If you've ever done that, you kind of have to will yourself to be drawn in a certain direction. It's hard to describe. But here's the problem I had the first few times I did this. I wanted to go outside and check things out, fly around, do all the crazy flying things that I'd always dreamed of. But I couldn't get out of the room. I mean, you can will yourself up to the window, but then how do I go through a window? I've never done that before. So this happened several times without me ever being able to get out of the room. But then finally, I do remember just going straight through a wall, and I was outside. So the first thing I wanted to do was zoom. So I went way up in the air and instantly woke up. Bummed out, man. Finally made it outside, and then I just almost instantly woke up. So along the way, I got books on the subject. That's what you did back in that day. You went to the bookstore, and I learned about the silver thread, I think they called it. It's a thread that connects your body to your consciousness when you're outside of it. And then it actually made sense with what I read from the Castaneda books about your will being like at your navel. So, I'm just piecing all these things together. But with the silver thread, if you get too far away from your body, it's like it's a rubber band stretching, the way they described it, and it's getting thinner and thinner. And if you go too far, it breaks and you automatically wake up. So I was finally able to go through this whole process, go outside and not just immediately go, and just, kind of slowly go around and check things out. And one thing I wanted to do was go down to my friend's house and see if I was actually experiencing the real world, see if I could see in his house or something, or if this is all just in my head. Well, I eventually came to the conclusion that I wasn't out in the physical world. I couldn't go spy on somebody in this state. I don't know, maybe others could. But another thing I notice is the further I get away from my body, the stranger things are going to get. Only they don't seem that strange at the time. It's like you get a block away, and instead of a truck being parked on the road, there's an elephant there. And then somewhere along the way, mid-20s, it stopped and hasn't happened in years. But as a teenage kid, this was a very profound experience, And it's something that I know that nobody else around has any answers on, which that's unfortunate. When I think about the knowledge of the ancients, I bet they did have some answers on that. But ultimately, I concluded I was not out in the physical world to where I could read what somebody put on a piece of paper down at the end of the block. It was all inside my consciousness. And it's just kind of like there's another realm here that very few people actually experience. I actually haven't thought about it in a long time, but I might see if I can get myself to do it again. And I'll tell you the best way to go about it. When you wake up in the middle of the night, roll over on your back. Don't care how you sleep, just roll over on your back, kind of concentrate on your third eye area, and just let your body go to sleep. It's just like going to sleep, only your consciousness never actually falls asleep. It's not so much something you do as something you allow to happen. Then if you do manage to get to the state where everything starts vibrating, keep calm. That's going to be the hardest part. Your heart's going to start racing. It's an adrenaline rush. And if you feed too much into what's going on there, you're either going to wake yourself up or you're going to be in that state of paralysis, not able to wake up. But he described it as just kind of rolling out. For me, it was just floating up and out. So just go with whatever naturally occurs. Don't try to force anything and stay calm.
Everybody will understand it, and they'll think it's a little weird, but we can backfill later. Sure. And that is that we live in a virtual reality. This physical reality is computed. Now, it's being computed by consciousness. Consciousness is individual in us, but it's also, there's a system of consciousness, and we're just a piece of that system. Okay, so think of what that means. If virtual reality has some very fundamental attributes. One, there's a computer. Two, there's a player. Three, the computer computes some virtual space that allows the players to see what's going on and who's interacting with who. So the virtual reality actually doesn't exist. It's just computer-generated eye candy for the players so that the players know where everybody is on the field and what they're doing. So here you are, and you are not a human. That's an avatar. You are a piece of consciousness. You're a piece of consciousness that's a chip off the old block. You're a subset. Computer talk, you're a, what's it called, a virtual machine inside a larger machine. You know, that's kind of standard stuff. That's how a big mainframe can have 1,000 users. You get 1,000 virtual machines, so everybody has their memory, everybody has their processing, and so on. So anyway, that's what you are. You're a subset of this larger system. And I can make all of this, as weird as it sounds now, I can make all of this logic and science. This is not hand-waving. This is not conjecture. This is the way it works.
So I did a video 2 months ago, if anybody wants to watch the long explanation. It was published October 24th. If you're watching this in the future and want to go watch it, I see most of you have seen it, which kind of surprised me. I didn't think it'd do that good, but I never have any idea what people are going to watch. You guys surprise me sometimes. What sucks is when I think I've got a really hot ticket here. Yeah, everybody's going to love this one, and then it flops. But really, some of the videos that I thought revealed the most about history in particular did the worst. This video right here about the cargo cults only got 7,000 views. If you want to know what was in people's minds 5,000 years ago, watch this video. I guess it's been a couple years, so I may have to do it again. But that is exactly how the priest class and religion began, whether there were superior beings here or not. Anyway, back to the point, Static. So here is life in a nutshell, and I think anyone who has acquired a sufficient amount of introspective knowledge comes to these conclusions. And like I said at the beginning, this is one of the few things I didn't sit down. I spent about a week of our nightly walks, me and Rock Dog, and I figured out what I think about this, what is in me. And it just so happens Thomas Campbell and a lot of other people, even Plato, kind of came up with the same conclusions. Although, not to brag, but I think mine has the one missing link that I've never heard anybody else quite fill in. Try not to break my arm patting myself on the back. To the left, you have the ethereal realm, which is God, source, and who knows what else. But everything we observe, the physical reality on the right, is all being projected from source. Hindu beliefs even help to break down what source is. What is that Godhead? It's the key components that go into this virtual reality game that we're playing here. And just like a video game, it needs power and then it needs the information. So Vishnu is the power source of everything, and that's just a piece of the Godhead. Brahma is the information aspect of things, the database, the server. And then Shiva is the collapsing of the wave function that those operate on. So Source is projecting the physical universe. Here we are in the real world. And the video game analogy works perfect here because the real world that we are observing is just the constant game board that we are all playing in. Now, we are all avatars in this game. And for every avatar, there is a mind that controls it. So the mind is the cell phone in this analogy. Inside of our mind, our device, we have our ego, and we have this illusion of separatedness from the rest of the game board. But if you can get the ego to shut up for a split second, that voice that's always in your head that you're talking to yourself with, that is purely an intelligence that you have created that you think is actually controlling you, but it's not. It'll tell you to do dumb shat all day, and if your mind's healthy, then you will resist that. But I think this is where my analogy goes a step further, because most people just stop at realization of self. But that self that you are actually experiencing is just the mind, just the cell phone that is receiving the signal. The true you is being projected from source. You're just one little electron piece of source that is vibrating back and forth in this huge electrical field. But I think even your thoughts are being projected to you from outside, and you're just interpreting them internally. Sometimes I'll do a video on a weird topic that doesn't get talked about a lot, and then all of a sudden 2 other people will have videos come out on the same subject. So it's kind of like this idea was being projected through several different receivers out there, and a couple of us decided to focus in on that. You can set an alarm for 60 seconds from now, and I guarantee you no one can tell me what they will be thinking about when that alarm goes off. We have hundreds of thoughts going through our head every minute. It's just the ones that we decide to isolate and concentrate on. So it's like you've got all these options being projected, and then it's what you decide to put your energy into that manifests into what your avatar on the game board actually does here in the real world. Y'all still with me here? I told you I was going woo-woo again. Bong and coffee break? So now let's play Thomas Campbell's explanation. I think it's very similar to mine. And then we'll get into what does this mean for the individuality of your soul. I know one commenter on that video was really bummed to think that there's no heaven or that even you're an individual soul, but I'm not saying that. So I'll do my best to explain how I see that.
You're getting a data stream. That data stream, you're the player. The data stream defines your reality. Just like if you're playing World of Warcraft, you get a data stream. That data stream is displayed as 1,000,000 pixels on your screen, and you look at those pixels and you see rivers and streams and people and houses, and you turn that data into physical reality. And that's the way it is with us. We're getting a data stream. Out of body, you just shift to a different data stream. There's other things going on. There's The Sims playing someplace else. You shift to a data stream, and now suddenly you're not in the World of Warcraft reality anymore. You're in a Sims reality. So that's how you really go out of body. It's entirely mental. It has nothing to do. It's just consciousness. It turns out all things paranormal, like out of body is a paranormal thing, all things paranormal happen with the intuitive side of your mind, not the intellectual side. And as much as people try to get there from the intellectual side, they fail. They can't do that. You have consciousness has 2 different ways of processing information. One is logically, that's the intellectual side, and the other is intuitively. Okay, that's the intuitive side. So you have these 2 pathways. Now in our culture, we work on that intellectual side, that logic side, and we hone that. We start learning things in kindergarten and up, and we learn that, and we hone it. We get good at it. We go to school. We go to graduate school. The intuitive side, science tells you it doesn't even exist. We don't work at it. But if you do work at it, if you put serious energy over a serious amount of time into that intuitive side, you find out that it's just as reliable, just as accurate as the intellectual side, except there's a big difference between them. On the intellectual side, you've got logic, but logic needs data. If you're going to use deductive logic, you've got to have data to plug in order to see what's logical. And most of the time, we don't have the data. The questions and the things we want to know that are really important, like should I marry Sally or should I marry Sue? There's no data that you can put in to come to a logical conclusion. And only the most trivial things do you have enough data. Where are my car keys? Well, where was I last? When did I get out of the car? What jacket was I wearing? What pants was I wearing? To go check the pockets. Then where did I go? And logic can help you out because it's a simple problem. But if it's a not so simple a problem, logic has its limitations because you don't have the data. On the intuitive side, it's totally beyond logic. There is no logic. You just know. It just happens. The information comes to you. It's intuitive. And on that side, it takes, just like the intellectual side, a lot of practice and a lot of work in order to hone that and educate it and understand it. But when you do, you get information. There is information available to you. There's a database out there, and that database is required. The reason it's there is because it's required for the rendering. You know, you have the larger conscious system configures a piece of itself to be the computer, and that computer, in order to compute this reality, needs information, needs data. So it creates a database from which it takes information and helps it create. So the rendering engine needs that, but you are really a piece of consciousness. That information is in the consciousness system. You're a piece of that, so you have access to it. The Hindus called that the Akashic Records.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what they called it.
Okay, so I want to tie all that into my analogy, but before I forget again, just think if you took this whole big complex train of thought here and you condense this down to one little symbol. This little symbol means all that we've been talking about for the last 10 minutes. So now think about if every symbol in this huge temple has that much meaning to it. Just something I've been thinking about for a while because, you know, this could be a wealth of knowledge that we have no clue about. Anyway, he started off with the out-of-body experience where you're going from the World of Warcraft game board all the way over to the Sims game board, which is just stepping off into a different reality. And, you know, we dream every night. We don't always remember it, but we go to some other game board. But to me on that, I still think that that's something that's happening inside your head. I don't think my dream world or my astral projection world is a game board that other players can be on, but that's just my thoughts, could be wrong. Next up was logical versus intuitive. So our mind is just the cell phone that is controlling the avatar. The avatar goes out and interacts with all of the game board and then records all the data. So all of your memories are stored there on the storage of the cell phone. Only you can only access part of it like a RAM drive. We don't consciously remember everything that's ever happened to us, but I think subconsciously we do. But we're just accessing the RAM processor, if I'm using the right terms there. So the logical part of your brain is you going through all of these stored memories you have and then making your logical conclusions about the logical problems you face. The intuitive side of you is what's being projected from source. That's the true eternal you. It doesn't think logically. Therefore, you can't describe it logically, so we can just say you intuit things. If you get quiet enough to let God speak to you, then it does. And that's why you just know something, like deep down in your soul. It's coming from the knower, the unknowable knower of all things. So logic is you accessing the memory on the phone, and intuition is the signal being broadcast to you and you not doing anything to get in its way. So before we get into heaven and hell, let me attempt to explain what a soul is. A soul is an individual electron in this massive electrical field. Just like alternating current, each electron is just shifting back and forth. The table here is vibrating at the right speed to be a table. And my soul electron is vibrating at a speed that it needs a cell phone to get into. So I think our soul's electrons are special compared to the game board electrons and energy field. So my electron, your electron sits there and controls the avatar in this game until the cell phone battery is old and wore out and can't handle the electron anymore. So then the electron goes out into the energy field looking for the next cell phone to charge up and inhabit. I guess in this in-between state, you recharge your electron for one lifetime of battery charge. So each electron is one piece of source made of nothing but source, the overall electrical field around, but you're still a particular electron in that electrical field. Then as soon as a new cell phone is manufactured, a female gets pregnant, then you are drawn based on your karma to the new device that's controlling your new avatar. But the real you is still you. I hope that made some sense. So in Buddhism, this process of life and rebirth is known as samsara until the conditions causing it, namely attachment and ignorance, end. At that point, instead of being reborn, consciousness transcends to a state called nirvana, which is the ultimate goal of Buddhism. How does consciousness move from one body to another? Consider the radio waves of a radio receiver. This is their analogy, not mine. The same thing, no. The waves emitted by the broadcast station are not the voices and music themselves, but energies at various frequencies moving through space and picked up by the radio receiver, then emitted as voices or music. Similarly, at the moment of death, the mental energy leaves the deceased body, moving through space, and is drawn into a womb ready for conception. When the fetus is born, that energy concentrates in the brain and from there on develops as a new individual. Do we always rebirth as humans? Not necessarily. There are various realms into which one might be reborn. Some people are reborn in heavenly realms, others in hell, still others in the realm of hungry ghosts. Heavenly realms are not a place, but a state of existence where beings have subtle physical forms and consciousness that experiences happiness and comfort. In some religions, there is a devout effort to be reborn into a heavenly realm, mistakenly thinking that this state is eternal. But this is not the case. Like all conditioned phenomena, the heavenly realms are also impermanent, and upon the end of their lifespan, beings can be reborn as humans. Hell, likewise, is not a place but a state of existence where beings have subtle physical forms and consciousness that often experiences anxiety and suffering as well as sadness. The realm of hungry ghosts is also a state of existence where beings have subtle physical bodies and minds constantly disturbed by desires and dissatisfactions. Thus, beings in heavenly realms typically experience happiness. Those in hell in the realm of hungry ghosts usually experience suffering. So the basic idea of karma is if your karma is good enough, then you can be reborn into a heavenly realm. Next step down is still good karma, and you get reborn like in a wealthy family, how some would look at it. Others would think more of a righteous family. But if your karma is bad, then you grow up poor or abused or any kind of bad things. Now, that's one way I've heard it described, and it's kind of about your overall karma. Now, another way I've heard it is what state you're in right at your moment of passing. Like if you're really angry, you might be born back down into the animal kingdom and be an angry dog. But it's described as your karma will pull you towards the womb that you deserve, basically. And if it is all about your state right there at the very end, then I think about the people that go in like traumatic warfare scenarios and it leads towards like generational anxiety, like masses of people being born into a worse situation than they actually deserve. Just kind of a cruel joke by the people who know. I don't know, just a thought. And another thought I've had is, do you reincarnate locally? Because when the Dalai Lama passes, they just look right there in Tibet. They don't search outside of Tibet. And you know, the Dalai Lama is supposed to be the same soul over and over again. So if you go overseas and you pass, then you're one of the slow learners next time around because you've never spoke German before. You were speaking English for the last 5 lifetimes, so you're getting the hang of it. You're a quick learner because you still intuit what you already knew. And I really think there's something to that. You look at child actors, 100 years ago, and they were terrible. But then fast forward to the 80s, 90s, you had some good child actors because the first generation that grew up with televisions had passed, and then they're coming back at that time. So it's already pre-programmed. They're not just learning a brand new concept. I've also heard that in Buddhism, where the first time up for a soul from the animal kingdom is going to be slow at all this. And I'll just tell you, for me, I was old when I got here. So I don't know what that means. It's just something I've always known. Anyway, that is probably enough rambling out of me, if anybody's still listening. But I guess in this line of thinking, there is still heavenly realms that you can go to. If that's disheartening to anybody coming from a Christian background, well, depending on what preacher you ask, most people ain't actually going to heaven anyway. I hear these guys all the time taking a little detail and saying, if you think of this one thing in this way, then you're going to hell. And I'm just like, really, dude? So the key to life is you believing exactly the right things of the information that's presented. And I just don't think that's the case. I do think there's a sense of justice and reward, and that it's innately in everybody to be good people for the most part. You could be coming from a really bad, former bad karma, but you start out good, and then for the most part, the world starts crapping all over you, and it's how you deal with that. Kids start out wanting all the attention, want to be the center of attention, and it's not until you get broken a few times that you start turning into a recluse like me. But hey, no pain, no gain. So just try to be a good person for the sake of being a good person. And then if you win an award and deserve to go to heaven, then that's a bonus. Okay, I shut up now. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I'll catch you on the next one. Static out.